What is up, everybody? Welcome back to a video. Hope y'all have an amazing day as usual. I'm back with a YouTube video. If you're new, please make sure to like, subscribe, and always comment down below. It really helps out with the videos. So today, I'm going to be taking a look at some interesting maps, and I'm going to show you guys these interesting maps of America. And I'm going to throw in some other... What's wrong? So in this video, I'm going to be taking a look at several maps from the U.S. as well as a couple from around the world, but mostly the U.S. To basically just show some really interesting facts about America and the rest of the world through maps. I think that maps are really interesting when you really think about it. Although they're kind of nerdy, I think that you can really learn some interesting stuff from maps, some different demographics and stuff like that. So without further ado, let's get into this. So this map shows us the decline in passenger railroad over time in the United States. This is from 1962 to 2005. So this map here really just shows us how much passenger rail has died off in America. And this is really sad because I'm a train enthusiast myself and I really enjoy seeing trains and learning about the history of railroads. Really in the 1900s is when... So I would say between the 1900s and the Great Depression is when passenger rail was at its peak. People were getting everywhere by train. Passenger rail was king. I would really say after World War II is when railroads started to decline and many went bankrupt. This is around the same time when car dependency was becoming a thing. The interstates were being built as well as suburbs. So people didn't really see the need to get around by trains. And that's sadly how it is today. Other than a couple metro areas, most people are getting around by car, and there are very few trains. Some Americans will never get on a train in their life because there just isn't that option available. Other than a couple of regional rail services, the only train service we really have in America is Amtrak, and Amtrak's pretty infrequent and is not very reliable. It's always late. Although they do have very nice facilities and good trains, they're always late. This is the passenger rail map in North America compared to Europe. Look at the difference in Europe. You can get almost anywhere by train. You can go in between countries by train. In North America, that's not really the option. And if you thought America was bad, Canada and Mexico are even worse. An interesting fact, which I'm going to show in our next map, is that 70% of Canada lives south of the U.S. Now, if that sounds confusing, that's understandable, but let me show you this map. So this line here is called the 49th parallel, and 70% of Canada's population lives south of the 49th parallel. And as you can see, there's some parts of America that go further north than the 49th parallel. So this part of the state is home to the cities of Toronto, Windsor, London, Quebec City, Montreal, and Ottawa. And as you can see, most of the population in Canada lives in this area because most of this country is uninhabitable and extremely isolated. And this just goes to show you how empty Canada really is, especially in the northern provinces. A perfect example of this would be the province of Nunavut. Nunavut is in the far north of Canada and is almost 3 times the size of Pakistan. For perspective, Pakistan has 250 million people and is one of the most populated countries in the world, while Nunavut, the province in Canada, only has 45,000 people, putting that into perspective. Another example of isolation would be this map of America. As you can see, 80% of the U.S. lives east of this line, while 20% lives west of this line. And this is crazy when you consider the fact that California, the most populated state in America, is west of this line, which really goes to show you how isolated the middle of America really is. This is, of course, compared to the eastern part of the U.S., which is home to the cities of New York, Philly, Boston, Miami, Atlanta, Detroit, Chicago. You get it. And, of course, Texas is split in half, but the eastern half of Texas has far more people than the western part of Texas. The reason why 20% of the population lives west of this line is because a lot of this part of the country just hasn't been developed, and some of it's uninhabitable. You have the Rocky Mountains, some of the highest elevations on the continent, and you also have a lot of deserts and other stuff. So it's just really not ideal for farming or civilization, which is weird because Phoenix and Las Vegas are in the middle of nowhere, but they're major cities. It's crazy. An even crazier example of this would be the map of China. 94% of China's population lives in the eastern part, while only 6% lives in the western part. Of course, the eastern part of the country is home to cities like Shanghai, Beijing, Chengdu, Hong Kong, Shenzhen, some of the most populated cities in the world. Okay, and western China is really isolated, home to places like the Gobi Desert, Tibet, and of course the Himalayan mountains. And most of western China is really just uninhabitable. And the next time you say that China's overcrowded, think again, because it's really not. China is very sparsely populated. Well, not really. The eastern part of the country is very crowded, but the western part is completely isolated. This map shows you just how big Alaska really is. Now, as 99% of people know, Alaska is not part of mainland America. And if Alaska wasn't in the US, Brazil, Australia, and China would be bigger in land area. But here we are in America. Thanks to Alaska, we are the third biggest country in the world in terms of size. So the second biggest state in America is Texas, and it is the largest on mainland America. And let me put into perspective how big Texas really is. So the easternmost point in Texas is about 11 hours from Jacksonville, Florida. However, if you wanted to go from the most eastern part in Texas to the most western part in Texas, it would be a 12.5-hour drive, which just proves how huge Texas actually is. That parts of Texas are closer to Florida than other parts of Texas. So from first glance, this map doesn't really look too interesting, but this area marked in red is actually part of Delaware. So the western part of the Delaware River is home to the state of Delaware, and on the eastern side is New Jersey, but part of mainland New Jersey is home to Delaware. It's called Finns Point, and it's home to a national cemetery. Just an interesting map I wanted to show you guys. It's not really anything too fascinating, but there you go. So this is the town of Texarkana, and if you were going to ask me what state this is in, you're not going to get a straight answer. Part of Texarkana is in Texas, the western side of town, and the eastern side of town is in Arkansas. The only thing dividing the states apart is a street, which I think is pretty cool, and it's not the only place in America that does that. This right here is the city of Bristol, and once again, if you ask me what state this is in, I'm not going to give you a straight answer. The northern part of Bristol is in Virginia, and the southern part is in Tennessee. And once again, the only thing dividing them is a street, and it actually goes right through downtown Bristol. So part of downtown's in Virginia, the other part's in Tennessee. So you can literally cross the street and go to another state. So this right here is a pretty cute map. You can see that right through the middle of America is a chef. Minnesota is the chef hat, Iowa is the head, Missouri is the shirt, Arkansas is the pants, and Louisiana is the boot. Tennessee is the tray, and Kentucky Fried Chicken is what's for dinner. So Colorado is the highest state in America, and I'm not talking about weed, I'm talking about elevation. In fact, Colorado's lowest point is 3,317 feet above sea level, which is higher than many states' lowest points. The highest point in Minnesota, Iowa, Missouri, Arkansas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, Florida, Wisconsin, Illinois, Indiana, Ohio, Michigan, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Delaware, Connecticut, and Rhode Island are lower than Colorado's highest point. So that's pretty interesting. The biggest surprise is Pennsylvania, considering that Pennsylvania, for the most part, is very hilly and mountainous. So I actually made this map right here. The states in green are states where over 50% of the land is forest. And as you can see, most of those states are on the East Coast or in the Deep South. And this is pretty interesting because this goes to show you how just open the Midwest and the West are. The only state on the West Coast that is actually over 50% forest is Washington State. I'm a little bit surprised that my home state, New Jersey, did not make the list, considering that it is called the Garden State. New Jersey barely made it. 48% of New Jersey is forest. I guess it's just that population density that's screwing New Jersey. Delaware, which is another East Coast state, surprisingly is only 27% forest, which is similar to states out west. So Delaware is not that much different from the West in this sense. So this is another map I made. These are the top 6 most densely populated states in the U.S. Number 1 is New Jersey. Number 2 is Rhode Island. Number 3 is Massachusetts. Number 4 is Connecticut. Number 5 is Maryland. Number 6 is Delaware. And if we're counting Washington, D.C., Washington, D.C. would be number 1. And pretty much everywhere from Boston all the way down to Richmond, Virginia is pretty crowded with some exceptions. Although not all of the Northeast is really crowded. This is northwestern Maine, and as you can see, most of northwestern Maine is literally completely empty. There are no towns, really nothing here. There's only a couple of dirt roads. This part of the state is completely isolated. What's even crazier is this part of northern Maine makes up about a quarter of the state, which is really crazy considering that outside of Yellowstone National Park, this is the most isolated part of the U.S. Okay, so that's going to finish it up for today's video. I hope you learned something. I think that maps are really a really cool way to see how different parts of the world are and the geography of certain places, because you don't really ever think of this stuff, but when it comes to mine, it's like, wow, it's pretty cool. So that's going to be for today's video. Make sure to like, subscribe, and God bless to all you guys.